Good afternoon. Here in Kuala Lumpur, we're holding a number of ASEAN events on an annual basis. Currently we have ministerial meetings, and this autumn we'll have summit-level events. There are three main formats: the Russia-ASEAN dialogue partnership. Yesterday had its annual Foreign Ministers meeting. The second format is the East Asia Summit. That includes a broad range of countries. First of all, those who develop ties with the Association of Southeast Asian States, developing a dialogue partnership. And the idea was for the East Asia Summit deliberate practical collaboration proposals to increase connectivity in the transport, economic and cultural spheres. The third format is the ASEAN format, the Forum on Regional Security, and the so-called regional forum. And all of that is held here in Malaysia. It is symbolic that it is in Malaysia. The Russian Federation took part in these events for the first time, laying the foundation for a dialogue partnership between Russia and the association, which is now at the level of a strategic partnership, as enshrined in the documents signed by Russia and ASEAN. This year we took stock of our mutual commitments signed during our previous meetings, including the Russia-ASEAN Summit held in 2016, which still is a forum laying the foundations for our strategic partnership. We are preparing our assessment of the progress in implementing our strategic partnership plan for 2021 to 2025. It is being implemented. All of the major components are underway, and our special representatives located in the ASEAN headquarters in Jakarta are actively working on the fourth strategic plan now. We expect it will be approved until the end of this year, ideally during the Russia-ASEAN Summit planned for October, also here in Kuala Lumpur. As for today's meeting, the East Asia Summit meeting, as I've said, it was primarily devoted to practical projects in various fields. We believe that this should be the basis for East Asia Summit activities. Sadly, our Western colleagues taking part in these events increasingly try to politicize and push ideologies and to Ukrainize these events to the detriment of the potential in the East Asia Summits for achieving practical results that would be significant for our countries and for our citizens. We are promoting a number of initiatives for several years, including the epidemic response initiatives, which is extremely relevant. We promoted this since 2021, and it was approved, but the West protested, and this collaboration is stalled. In 2023, we also proposed developing tourism exchanges and cooperation initiatives to increase the connectivity between our societies and our citizens. But tourism is developed in any case. But the incentives that we proposed and that were approved for introduction have not yet progressed to any significant extent. We also made a proposal that also had been approved to develop remote areas. Big countries such as Russia, Malaysia, Indonesia, and also China and other states have remote regions which do have a civilization, but the goods of civilization have not spread and at the same level as in the major cities. And it is expected that this would bring practical results. Another initiative is on humanitarian issues, and namely to increase cultural connectivity between our countries. Asia is a huge countries, the cradle of several great civilizations, with immense cultural heritage, which certainly merits mutual respect and has a promise of a mutual enrichment. We hope that this initiative will be taken up for the future. And naturally, the East Asia summits and the ASEAN Regional Forum meetings often feature exchanges on topical political issues. All of the ASEAN members today and most partner countries, including Russia, spoke with concern about the tragedy in the Palestinian territories, which is becoming even more acute. The humanitarian disaster that was artificially created in Gaza is now being followed by a similar situation in the different part of the Palestinian territories, namely the West Bank, where Israel is still pursuing an aggressive policy of creating an increasing number of settlements at a record pace. So soon there will be nothing left of the territories covered by the Palestinian National Authority. I was surprised to learn that there is now a Hebron Emirate project. And this Hebron Emirate is seen as a project to create a united Palestinian Emirates on Palestinian lands. This sounds like science fiction, but the fact that such ideas crop up in the public space demonstrate the risks that exist with regard to a prospect for a Palestinian state that was mandated by the UN General Assembly and the Security Council. And this is certainly a big challenge for the international community. And we also highlighted the problems that were created by the unprovoked attack by Israel on the Islamic Republic of Iran, which was followed by missiles and bomb strikes from the United States in violation of the international law and the Non-Proliferation Treaty, as well as IAEA principles, which had covered the nuclear sites that were attacked by its guarantees. The ceasefire that seems to have been enacted should continue without any exceptions, and despite the damage to the non-proliferation regime and IAEA guarantees, despite all the damage dealt to those regimes, we must remediate the situation and bring it back to the political course, and to try to address everything through negotiations. And we must make sure that such blatant disregard of the founding documents ensuring the peaceful use of nuclear energy do not repeat. Any attempts to possess nuclear technologies is excluded, and we're talking about peaceful use, of course. We spoke about the situation in Myanmar. We support the normalization process supported by Myanmar leadership, and we support ASEAN's aspiration to support the normalization and to restore Myanmar's full-scale involvement in the association's work. The Korean Peninsula was noted as one of the areas where there is a need to avoid provocations against North Korea. There are military alliances between countries. Large-scale exercises, including the nuclear component, are being held. And this is a place of a serious conflict potential, and we will make every effort to protect the legitimate rights of our North Korean allies and to prevent any provocations which could really end badly. Our Chinese friends, among the problems in the region that they deem a priority, noted the disputes around the South China Sea. We believe that this problem should be addressed based on the Code of Conduct signed between Beijing and ASEAN countries. And this is the basis on which their negotiations are ongoing. We believe it is unacceptable for any ex-regional power to be interfering in this process. Mr. Wang Yi gave a detailed description of the situation around Taiwan and stated determination to settle the problem based on the principle of a single and indivisible Chinese state. We also noted the statements by our Western colleagues, which also made several similar statements before, that they respect the One China principle, but they cannot change the status quo. This is obvious hypocrisy, and everyone who knows the West's policy towards Taiwan knows what is happening. They're treating Taiwan as an independent state. And so today we reaffirmed our approach in support of Beijing's position and our readiness to help implement this position. And this is what I wanted to say. Now for questions. Minister Lavrov, last year, during the meeting with the Foreign Ministry, Vladimir Putin said there is a need for a Eurasian security architecture where no state can ensure their security at the expense of others. What is the attitude of ASEAN countries towards this project, especially with growing militarization from NATO? The initiative to create a Eurasian security architecture is essentially a development of a previous initiative put forward by the Russian president that they put forward at the first Russia-ASEAN summit, namely the creation of a greater Eurasian partnership through establishing ties, joint projects and programs between the integration entities that exist here in the Eurasian space. The connections between the executive secretariats and heads of the Eurasian Economic Union and the Commonwealth of Independent States, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, on the one hand, and with ASEAN countries on the other hand, have already been established. And this is a very useful process that allows us to harmonize our integration projects, to avoid a duplication of efforts, especially since the membership of these integration associations is overlapping. So we do promote the Great Eurasian Partnership, understanding that practical discussions are open to everyone located in Eurasia, and they're open to input from any integration entities. There is great potential to establish ties with the EAU, SCO, ASEAN, and the Gulf Cooperation Council, for example. In South Asia, the South Asian Peninsula, there's also a range of potential collaborations with the local integration unities. So there's a lot of potential to increase our connectivity and collaboration. And as we move towards practical implementation, practical foundations are now being created to ensure security on the Eurasian continent. And this is something that I have covered multiple times. And this also covers Africa and Latin America. There are many sub-regional associations, but both Africa and Latin America have the African Union and the Latin American and Caribbean states community. And the most powerful and the most quickly developing region of the world must have a similar entity, a similar platform for dialogue. And we do realize that it is not a quick process, that all of the countries on the continent who are invited to take part in these discussions must first mature to a certain stage in the deliberation of this project. They have not yet reached the stage where they would wish to take part in this effort, while new colonial efforts are being made to include Eurasia into the sphere of Western influence. NATO is positioned as a defensive alliance. However, under the current conditions, they say, there is a threat to NATO countries emanating from the Indo-Pacific region, as they call it. So they see a threat from the Pacific, the South China Sea, the Taiwan Strait. That is a source of a threat to them. So our proposals, including the Great Eurasian Partnership, are based on respect for the entities and organizations created in a given region, including respect for ASEAN's central role, the role that it has played over almost 60 years in bringing countries together, countries who want to cooperate based on principles of equality and inclusivity. So our concept respects the role of ASEAN and similar organizations, while the NATO concept assumes that it will be NATO who dictates how everyone must behave, whether they need ASEAN at all. Formally, they recognize ASEAN. The Western countries took part in the forums that we're having here now. But as they're saying these words of respect, they're creating these formats of 3 and 4, the quartets. You know, there's this AUKUS project where they're planning to transfer technologies for nuclear submarines. And I already mentioned that they're trying to introduce nuclear components to the south of the Korean Peninsula with their exercises. The Indo-Pacific 4 with Japan, South Korea, Australia, and New Zealand, and a number of other quads like Quad 1 and Quad 2. They're trying to involve ASEAN members to tear them from the association. And we are having conversations about this with our friends, and they see the difference in approaches, where one approach is inviting everyone to the table to elaborate consensus positions that include everyone's interests and trying to achieve a genuine balance, and the different approach, the other approach is having the North Atlantic figures trying to call the shots, trying to impose their own rules, and we believe that is not constructive. So these formats and these forums that are held here every year should really benefit our mutual understanding. Everyone should act in an open manner without holding any stones behind your backs, any covert plans against anyone. But so far the process has developed in various directions, but I believe that our approach will be more promising. The BRICS summit several days ago in Rio showed that against the backdrop of stringent sanctions from Washington, BRICS is becoming a viable alternative to Western arbitrariness. Are ASEAN countries ready to deepen and expand their cooperation with BRICS countries, including Russia? Well, to be honest, I believe that ASEAN countries are showing interest in cooperation with Russia independently of what is happening in the West and the actions of the United States or their allies. They don't have, well, they don't have this thing where they would not be friends with Russia if the West didn't put pressure on them. Our friendship started long before the current US administration started imposing sanctions, including tariffs. Tariffs are also essentially a form of sanctions. So I don't really see any sign in our development, in the development of our relations with ASEAN and within BRICS. I don't see any signs of a direct response by those countries, a response to those sanctions. But if you do have a choice where you can have a trade within your association without any unscrupulous means being applied against competitors, or you can have a trade with someone who wants to blackmail you, I think you will make the natural choice. Based on your meetings as part of the Russia-ASEAN Forum and others, which conclusions could you make? Are ASEAN countries willing to make concrete actions to counter NATO's attempts to get a foothold in the region? And do ASEAN states have the capacity, the resources to stay a guarantor of security in the regions, considering the tariffs that President Trump introduced against many countries in the region? Well, I just laid out our vision of NATO's actions in the region, trying to introduce its infrastructure, trying to get a foothold, as you say. Now, I have no doubt that ASEAN countries understand what is currently happening, that they're being offered to stay ASEAN members, while at the same time joining structures that are not inclusive, that are bloc-like in character, and that are largely aimed at creating a political and diplomatic front to contain China and Russia to boot. So I don't want to decide for them. It is their sovereign choice, and this is the way we see it. But preserving ASEAN's unity and its central role in determining the mechanisms, formats and architecture of cooperation in Southeast Asia is the best for everyone's interests. Marco Rubio said after talks with you yesterday that you discussed a new plan on Ukraine. Which side suggested these new approaches, and what are those approaches? How are they different from what was discussed earlier? And as to the United States weapons supplies, are they part of the new plan? Was that discussed? Well, I will answer in the words of Donald Trump. Well, do you expect me to tell you? You can expect great surprises. Well, if you're well aware of how we diplomats operate, I think you can certainly understand that we're not going to comment right now. The 3rd of July is a conversation with the President Trump. President Putin clearly stated our positions and our ideas. As to the conversation, the leak or the deepfake or whatever that was about bombing Moscow or Beijing, I don't think we should discuss that. We're discussing serious matters here. Did you discuss offensive strategic capabilities with Marco Rubio? And you can not even ask. I think you don't even need to ask. We did not discuss anything like that. I also have a question about diplomatic activities. Chancellor Merz recently said that diplomatic means to settle the Ukrainian conflict have now been exhausted. So on the one hand, I want to ask you to comment as head of the foreign ministry, and on the other hand, as a seasoned diplomat, do you believe that Germany's actions seem a part of the diplomatic arsenal? Well, this is a good question. This is something that we have been concerned about, because the recent statements and the recent actions by Berlin, Paris and London demonstrate that the current class of politicians that is now in power in those countries have forgotten the lessons of history, the lessons humanity has drawn from history, and are now trying to rally Europe for a war against Russia, not a hybrid war, but an actual war. So when they televised France's Barrot's French conference, it was a conference or a political debate, and he was at the stage where some other participants and a French person who had visited the Donbass asked the question, why is Paris supporting the Nazi regime, which is now reigning in Ukraine? And if you saw Mr. Barrot launching a hysterical fit, shouting that France is protecting the territorial integrity and international law, the territorial integrity of Ukraine, that caused some part of the audience to applaud. But with everything that we know about the Kiev regime and its actions, with everything that we know about why they need territorial integrity, and they needed to suppress the rights of Russian-speaking populations, and those who disagree with the Kiev's policy after the coup d'etat are physically exterminated. I presented a selection of quotes by Zelensky, Shmyhal, Yermak, Podolyak that clearly state that Ruskies should be exterminated, legally or even better, physically. And when Mr. Barrot and the likes of him say that they won't agree to anything but territorial integrity of Ukraine, they're betraying themselves. And as to Mr. Merz, here has made us many amusing statements, including his statement that he aims to make Germany the leading military power in Europe again, and he didn't even flinch, saying again. And he said that Israel should work in Iran as they're doing the dirty work for them. That is also a quote that would be fit for a director of a concentration camp, when they suggested that they should use collaborators to exterminate the Jews because they don't want to dirty their hands. So if Mr. Merz believes that peaceful means have now been exhausted, perhaps he now decided to devote himself to militarizing Germany at the expense of his people, all to have the opportunity to march under those Nazi slogans, saying that they should deflect and counter the threats emanating from Russia. I think every reasonable politician realizes that there's no such thing as the Russian threat. President Putin has said time and again that it's just nonsense pushed to make people obey, to prevent people from rising against the social economic stagnation that they're seeing around them in Europe. And all of that leads to hundreds and hundreds of billions sent to Ukraine once again. And I also encountered a quote. It was interesting for me to try and find out how Europe saw Germany at the time. And this is an Aftenbladet, a quote from 1941. It says, "Germany has broken its chains and is now rising free towards its European-wide and historical mission to squash the red regime that is threatening the essence of freedom." They sung praise to the Nazis as freedom fighters. If Europe is indeed moving in this direction, that is lamentable, and we will certainly consider this in every aspect of our planning.